Hey folks, my name is Kat Dawson. I'm the managing partner of Diver Collective, a Brooklyn-based tech company, and I'm an out entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. As a reminder, the show is coming to you live via the Startup Radio Network. On this week's episode, we are welcoming Kat Dawson, joining us all the way from my former stomping ground, Brooklyn, New York. So, Kat, welcome to the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
Thanks, Rhodes. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And for those folks who aren't familiar with Kat, she has over 10 years of experience across strategy, operations, and the arts. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Diver Collective, which is a Brooklyn-based tech company. Diver Collective exists to help organizations understand and meet their digital engagement needs in a way that supports their mission and values. Kat also speaks to corporations and groups of professionals about leveraging her lived experiences as an out professional to inspire organizations to develop more LGBTQ inclusive workplaces. So I think that the Out Entrepreneur is a perfect fit for you, Kat. I'm thrilled, again, to have you on the show. Why don't you kick off the conversation and just let us know a little bit more about Diver Collective? I know for some folks, when we hear a tech-based company, that could be many things. So tell us a little bit more about it and what makes it unique.
So Diver is a software company primarily. We're not a cool social app looking for traction. I don't think that on the day-to-day we're doing anything particularly exciting or unique from maybe a customer, like an individual customer standpoint. But I think what we do for companies is really exciting. So we design and build apps and websites and configure content management systems for organizations of all sizes, but we prefer to focus on small to medium entities who are looking for a dynamic and agile team of dedicated professionals who can bring a holistic range of experiences to bear on advising them on what technology they should get, and then getting that technology lined up perfectly or as perfectly as possible with their needs and goals.
So that sounds amazing. And I think for myself and maybe other folks were like, okay, that we get it. And can you tell us a little bit more? So can you give us
Sure.
an example of, like, in terms of the content management, just like, what do you mean by that? Why don't you talk to us a little bit more about the content management side of what you mean and maybe an example or two there?
Sure. So a content management system is a way of thinking about organizing data that your company has. Depending on what that company means, it can be a whole lot of different things. But I'll use my favorite example, which is an art museum. So an art museum has a bunch of paintings and sculptures and photographs, and they need for each of those items to be able to organize them by year or artist or where they were made or what materials they are made out of or size. They need to track all the times that they have written about that object or times when an article has been published about it. And they need to attach all of that information not only to the object, but be able to sort by all these different sorts of categories. That's one kind of content management system. There are lots of different ways that these can manifest themselves across different kinds of companies, but that's my favorite way of explaining it because it's something concrete that we can all kind of relate to. And then from a content management system, you can display that information differently. So sometimes it's just internally for your team to curate a show of 19th century paintings, but other times it's a way for you to get information up onto your website about a show about 19th century paintings, or to show on an app a piece of writing that you attached to one painting that you thought was pretty descriptive of it.
So I love that example, and I feel like it's such a great segue into my next question, which is your origin story of becoming an entrepreneur. And disclosure for our audience, like, I've known Kat for quite some time, so I won't say how long because it makes me, I'm approaching a milestone birthday.
Dates us
so
both.
Yes, it does. It certainly does. So I remember, you were working towards your PhD, you earned it, you're on that kind of academic track, and you're still in that world, right? You're also you're also in the tech space now. And I guess I'm missing some chapters in your life of, like, what was the calculus, of determining next steps for you, what you want to do with your career, and making that decision to take the leap and being a co-founder of this amazing tech company?
Well, yeah, Boy, Rhodes, we've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah.
So my story is a little bit circuitous, and I really feel like it's only fallen into place in a way that makes sense since we founded Dive, or maybe just a little bit before that. So this will maybe a little bit longer than anyone wants to listen to, but it's the result of having a little bit of a frenetic background. So I'll go back to college, basically. So I graduated from Smith College in 2008, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I moved home to Washington, D.C., and I got a job at a bike shop. And Rhodes, another thing you and I share is a love of cycling. So you can get the desire to be around bikes all day.
Oh, yeah.
If I didn't know what else to do. So pretty soon after that, the CEO promoted me for what felt at the time like absolutely no reason to the role of HR manager. But there were very few women identified folks at this company. And I think she just wanted me in leadership for companionship, frankly. But she mentored me really closely, and I ended up really learning a ton about leadership, finance, operations, and strategy. But then I left that job to pursue a PhD in art history, a subject that I'd long been passionate about, because I think that art gives people an opportunity to see and experience difference in a way that's non-threatening. And sometimes it can be a portal to better understanding and more compassionate sort of communication. So while I was at this program, though, I was the first and only student in the first year of the only queer art history program in the United States. Wow. And it was founded by this incredible scholar, curator, and human named Jonathan David Katz, who incidentally was a founding member of ACT UP and Queer Nation, two of the sort of cornerstone activist queer movements in the United States. And I won't go into all of the many things that Jonathan has given me and done for me, but suffice it to say that I am incredibly fortunate to have had a mentor like him. Mm-hmm. And my efficacy of mentorship rant is for another time, but mentorship is super important. Anyway, about halfway through the program, I noticed that the art history job market was really shrinking and that I might have to leave New York if I wanted to find a job. And that wasn't super appealing to me. I simultaneously realized that I knew a bunch about business that, when coupled with my PhD in cultural industry experience, might make me a really strong source of outside support for cultural institutions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I ended up finishing my PhD a year early, went to a 1-year MBA program, and then went on to found this company that applies all of my business acumen as well as my cultural industry experience, not just to museums, but also to all sorts of other kinds of businesses.
Yes. You say it's circuitous, and I think this is the journey of an entrepreneur, right? I mean, you were following the breadcrumbs the whole way. You get out of college, you're following your passions, right? You're going to a bike shop, you're working there. And like you said, mentorship is a big piece, and the CEO of the bike shop is like, seeing potential in you as a leader, developing you, and you're learning the basics. Yes, you're in a bike shop, but you're learning the basics of running a business and taking that, while you're also following your passion of art history and learning about the arts. And you don't lose any of this stuff as you go along. That's just adding to your arsenal of like all of the amazing skills and what you have to give to the world, and kind of coming out of that, going back to New York, realizing you really love New York, you don't want to leave New York. And if you want to stay in the academy, you may have to, and getting creative around that and recognizing you can support cultural institutions by, beefing up your skills in business and figuring out how to use tech, how to design the software company. And, just that example that you gave in the beginning of what makes your business unique. I mean, you're doing it, you're doing all of the things, and I'm sure you're still biking, right? So you followed your passions, you aligned your skills with your passions, and, you co-founded this great business. So I think that's, sometimes it doesn't make sense. If you look back at 2008, you may not have anticipated being here. But as you shared your story, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that makes sense. And so, yeah, it's part of this is following the breadcrumbs. Talk to me a little bit more about when you're working with your clients. How are you measuring your impact? How are you measuring success? And I know every business is different, but, from your own perspective, and I know this is still kind of relatively new for you, but what feels satisfactory to you, after you've walked away from working with a client?
Right. So obviously client satisfaction itself is a big indicator. For example, for a lot of clients, we're either taking an older website and making something that's like new and cutting edge and going to really be able to carry them for the next like 3 to 5 years, because the rate with which technology is changing, 5 years even seems like an impossibly far away horizon, right?
Yes.
So if we can build a product, whether it's a website or a content management interface or an app that our client feels satisfied with, that in and of itself is a great barometer for whether or not we're successful. But also, we try to do a lot of data analytics. We try and build relationships with clients that can carry us for a long period of time with them. And I'm not talking about like licensing them software or having an ongoing sort of service provider agreement with them where they're paying us a regular fee. But I mean rather establishing human relationships with our clients, so that down the road, after we've rolled a product out for them, they'll come back to us and say, we've collected all this data, but we don't really know what to do with it. How can you help us understand it? Or can you help us do something with it? And so when we can go back in and see sort of, if we either we hear from the client that certain key metrics for them have changed or improved for the better on track with the rollout of this new technology, that's always really helpful. If it's an app, if it gets really great results from their customers in the app store, that's a great barometer. And then, but also if we can go in and do these sort of data audits down the road, that's a great way that we can help ourselves and our clients understand how something is working, and then also get where it's not. Because like any other product that any kind of company rolls out, you just don't know once it goes out the door if it's really going to stick, or who you're going to miss or who you're going to catch with it. And so when we can look at the data and get a window into that and see that it's hit, some of the target, and identify who it's missed and start capturing these new audience in other ways, that's a really powerful metric for us is use data from our products.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, I mean, just going back to how you opened your response here with client satisfaction, it's exactly what you're talking about in business, is establishing the human relationships and getting curious, right? Of, getting to know your client, asking them, what is it that they need? And of course, you can design a website, you can design a content management system, and you have that expertise and you continue to perfect it. You also want to customize it, right? You want to be able to meet their needs. And, when you establish those relationships, people like, know, and trust you. You've done a great job at designing whatever the product or service is. And once the data starts to kind of roll in, there's another service, there's another product that you can potentially develop, because that client's likely to go back to you to say, hey, this is awesome, and we have all of this other information. What the heck do we do with it? So it's like constant. And I think that's the piece with kind of the tech world in and of itself, is there's constant iterations, there's constant improvements. And even like with a website, like what you were saying, in 3 to 5 years, it's outdated. I was so excited when I started my business almost 4 years ago, and my website is so outdated now, and I'm just like, where, knowing that companies like yours exist, now hopefully the audience will consider you as a source to kind of, number one, help update websites, but also like, what do you actually do with the information and the analytics now that we can measure this in new and sophisticated ways? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I like that you lead with that, just kind of your impact and your success is rooted with the relationships that you have with your clients. And those are ongoing. They don't go away, right? So talk to us about when you started your business, and I know this is relatively new, like where you're at right now and where you can see yourself in the future. What about growing, in these kind of early years has surprised you with what you thought you were going to do in the business, what you're doing now, and what do you see kind of for the future of Diver Collective?
So I have been thinking about this idea for a number of years. And I spent the first, I would say 18 months doing market research as I was kind of like in the middle of my PhD and not really wanting to write my dissertation.
I think that happens.
I feel like it happens to a lot of people.
Yes.
I was like, what else can I do? And since I ran out of like clean surfaces to clean in my house, I started researching this idea. And so I did a lot of market research on this, which remains ongoing. I mean, market research is like something that we do every day in one way or another to understand who else is doing this stuff. But then I actually, in the business school I went to, they placed a huge emphasis on entrepreneurship. So I went to IE, which is in Madrid. It's one of the top business schools in the world, but it's one of the very few that places a huge emphasis on entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. A lot of business schools will like people go there for consulting or for finance, and we had plenty of those people, but the majority of people were entrepreneurs who were either wanting to be entrepreneurs or sort of came from entrepreneurship backgrounds and wanted to strengthen other skills and return there. And so while I was there, I incubated a product that was kind of like, I didn't intend for it to be a throwaway. I haven't really found something to do with it really because the technological landscape has shifted and it's a little bit obsolete. But I wanted to incubate a product. And when I came home, I'd been away for a year, and a year was really long enough for that technological landscape to shift in a way that made the thing that I had produced not super relevant anymore, which was a great lesson for me in humility and resilience, right? So I got home to the States fully intending to launch this company, and then it was like, the thing that you're trying to do is no longer useful. So what do you do now? So that was, I think, a really powerful early lesson, because all of my colleagues had to pivot their ideas during business school, and I was so deeply pleased with myself that I hadn't. And it was just because it hadn't hit the market yet. Yeah. And so pivoting was really big. And I think that really is the best answer to your question, even though it's not a direct answer. It's like, something with entrepreneurship, it's about humility and resilience. These are these key features of leadership generally. But I think that when we talk about entrepreneurship, there's such a focus on the idea, or you as this sometimes idiot savant, but a savant, like having this wonderful concept that everybody's going to love. But I think that there's this much more fundamental and less glamorous side to it, which is about saying, okay, I want to do a company. I have this skill set. What can I offer through this skill set? And then, if the thing that you first came up with doesn't work, going to the next thing. And if that doesn't work, going to the next thing. So this piece of resilience and humility, I think, has been something that's been maybe surprising or both surprising and the most challenging part of this.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that really answers the question, but
no, it does. It absolutely does. In terms of, when you started, what you thought was like this amazing idea, which at the time I'm sure it was. And part of solving problems, especially when you see them out in the market, is that other people are thinking about those problems too. And sometimes they beat you to it, or sometimes there's new technology that those problems no longer exist, but guess what? There will be new challenges, and I really liked what you were saying about pivoting, having some degree of agility. And that's the magic when you're getting started in business. I mean, that's what allows you to compete against much larger Titanics, of corporations, is that you and your team are a bit smaller than, 160,000 person organization. So yeah, you can quickly adjust. You are a software tech-based company. You had one particular product that you wanted to take to market. Someone beat you to it, or that need is no longer there. Well, guess what? You can be agile and identify some new needs. And it sounds like you're doing that. So kudos to you, because that's not always easy. I mean, sometimes we stay attached to our ideas, and sometimes it's hard to get back up after you stumble, right? And part of entrepreneurship, like you said, is the resiliency factor too. So just keep getting up and keep trying, and you're doing it. So I think that's really inspirational. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBTQ entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business, to know you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting practice. I'm dedicated to growing the belonging movement to empower leaders just like you, from the largest organizations to the smallest, to build healthier workplaces. That's why I'm thrilled to announce the Belonging at Work Virtual Summit. I'm taking the excitement of an in-person conference into the online world so that we can all participate, no travel required. The summit will feature in-depth conversations with dozens of today's leading diversity, equity, and inclusion thought leaders who will share their knowledge, skills, and stories so that we can all build our confidence in how to build more inclusive cultures in our organizations. This summit invites you to join these courageous conversations about radical inclusion, the future of work, the role of allies and accomplices, the power of sharing our diversity stories, and how we, as change agents, can take more care of ourselves so that we can be more effective ambassadors for change and belonging. To learn more, visit belongingatworksummit.com and register for free. Yes, that's free today. Again, that is belongingatworksummit.com. Together, let's grow the belonging movement. So one topic that I know is you're equally passionate with, maybe more, maybe, I don't know, but it's on the topic of workplace culture. I know you do a lot as an individual giving back to LGBT communities. I'm curious, in your business, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're setting up in terms of giving back to community? I mean, you're based in Brooklyn. What are some things that you're thinking about, in terms of folks in the workplace who have to cover different aspects of themselves? And we as LGBT folks understand that really well. Just to kind of signal to folks that you're trying to create a culture of belonging at Diver Collective.
Gee, there's so many things that we're trying to do that we certainly haven't succeeded at yet, or are just two. There are really two of us.
Yeah.
We have an ad hoc team of 5 total, but there are 2 of us who are full time, and so it's we want to do a bunch of really awesome, diverse and inclusive recruiting and hiring. It's but we aren't in a position to hire anyone right now.
Sure.
But so foregrounding, I have hired one person, and I just had other people who were very close by to me in various capacities who I needed a skill set, and the closest person who happened to be available is serving that need. And so, our website has a couple of people on it right now, and that's the core team. But I know that our first hire, or I guess our second hire, that process is going to follow all of the best, most up-to-date protocols for diverse recruiting, ensuring that there's a diverse candidate slate, ensuring that people are considered not because of where they came from, but because of the promise and the drive and the commitment that they can bring to the job. And I think that thinking about this really crucial process of hiring is just one facet, right? We're such a small company. And so for us, that has outsized import, that our third hire is someone who's been brought onto the company through these processes, right?
Yeah.
And that's not irrelevant in a bigger company, but that's just the tip of the iceberg in a much bigger company, right?
Oh yeah.
So, we can't signal that because we have I'm not hiring anyone right now.
Right.
And I absolutely can't wait until until we have the need and the resources to hire someone. That will be the most exciting day, I think.
Yeah.
So that's, within our company, it's we have all these aspirations, but we're too small to do some of them. But But definitely, I present as non-binary. I don't personally have any pronoun preferences. I'm okay with she, they, or he. It doesn't really matter to me. And I know that I'm very much the minority. Almost everybody has a very, very, very strong pronoun preference. And I mean that for we don't talk about how cis heterosexual people do, but they sometimes have the strongest pronoun preferences.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And police them very rigorously. And so, but my co-founder doesn't present as non-binary, but identifies as non-binary. And so they prefer they, them pronouns. And so creating a workplace culture around us is really important. We actually don't have our pronouns listed on our website, which is something that keeps bugging me. And then I keep forgetting about, which is a great lesson in priorities, right? Because I'm out there as this gender nonconforming person, and I'm it's enough that I'm on the website and that you can see that I'm there and I'm the managing partner of this whole enterprise, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually not enough. I'm sure there's someone who might be one identity or another who may look at our website, not think too carefully about me, and say they're not a gender diverse group, or who may look at our website and be they're not a racially diverse group. And those criticisms are absolutely fair, but we seek to rectify that through constantly implementing better processes. So that's sort of we're working on it. Because right now it's a game of I feel the house is on fire. We're trying, we've got we're signing fantastic clients. We're doing really exciting work, and our website and our team are sort of everybody's working at lightning speed on other stuff, but we will prioritize that. We have prioritized this. It will continue to be something that we strive to improve upon every day.
Yeah.
But then sort of from I mean, so there's one thing about like how we're signaling, and then there's this whole other section that's like, what do we do to support others? So my co-founder and I are both involved in mentoring out, youth isn't the right word, but like, younger folks who we're in our ancient mid-30s. So we're involved in like they and I each do different mentorship programs, either like through informal networks or through more sort of like formal networks. I sort of focus on more like career, public speaking, resume building, figuring out life's path oriented stuff. And my co-founder, who's an incredibly talented engineer, does a lot of like engineering and coding mentorships for marginalized youth. And so we're big on mentorship, obviously, if I haven't said that word enough. And we strive to participate in those programs, and then also to seek out, opportunities to make ourselves available to people who may be able to identify us as people who could help them. So that's another way. And then the speaking thing that I do, I go speak to, I'll talk to anyone, but but I've usually asked to go speak to major corporates that may be at one level or another ready to start thinking about a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and implementation or training or something, but like aren't really ready to go because everybody isn't on board or enough of the key stakeholders aren't on board. Mm-hmm. So I go give these talks where I make the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I'm also like a non-binary person in a suit throwing McKinsey statistics at people and mixing in my personal story a little bit. And that's usually, for me, it's not a public service. But I see that as something that's really important that I continue to do and continue to put out there, because I'm often invited by mid-level managers who are like the only out person they know in their company at their level,
The only and lonely. That's what I say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so they're like, hey, I have this budget of like, $0 and 0 cents or like transportation to bring someone in to talk about something that matters. And it's just me. Can you come speak? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to be there. And oftentimes I spoke at a place maybe 6 months ago. The person who invited me was wonderful, and they had like a team. It's not an ERG quite yet, but they had a team that they worked with to do a couple of events here and there. And after the event, they really felt like they were out there on their own from their company. And after their event, one of their managers came up to me and said like, "Hi, I'm the enemy." And I was like, wow, okay. So either I didn't get through to you, or you're really or I made you feel some way that's really problematic. And I was really, I'm really ready to reevaluate how I was giving this talk. But what it came down to is that he was like, I'm certain that I'm part of the problem and I don't really know what to do about it, but I treat everyone fairly. And, and this is like a very quick conversation that he and I had afterwards, where I had the opportunity to make a point about the difference between equality and sort of equal opportunity, and the idea that equity and equal opportunity, where, you can have good intentions, you can sort of think you're giving people equal opportunities. Whereas through, if you shift the way that you think to an equity lens, you sort of begin to come to understand that everyone's needs a different kind of support. Yeah. I should say, by the way, that I don't make that point up myself. That's a point that Jennifer Brown, the CEO of Jennifer Brown Consulting, made to me while we were discussing another topic a few days ago. So I don't want to take any credit for that. But I don't know where that company is in their transformation, but I know that for sort of through word of mouth, that company has sort of moved the ball forward. So though that isn't like, I feel very good about the mentorship stuff where I can make an impact on the life of one person and sort of give them all the attention that I have to give, for a period of time, much in the same way that my doctoral mentor gave me attention. I don't feel as instant gratification when I go speak at corporates, but I nevertheless think it's really important, because seeing someone who looks like me stand up who doesn't work at the company and expose themselves a little bit, take some risks that it isn't safe necessarily to take as an employee. And then also like take some punches, because I will get up there and have people sort of come up to me afterwards and just like, I mean, no one's ever used any inappropriate speech towards me, but people have conveyed a profound skepticism and, of sort of the idea of my existence or whatever. And I'm fine. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to take those punches for the employees and to push back a little bit and to encourage you to think a little bit more critically in a way that, your colleagues can't take the risk of doing. And so I think that that can be a little bit of a harder task with lower payoff for me. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it can have an outside effect as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you're giving back in three really important ways. And on the speaking side of things, you're sharing your story, right? And you will never know the impact that you have if you're presenting, regardless of the audience. If you're presenting in front of 100 people, those are 100 different experiences happening because of your story, and making connections, perhaps to an experience that they never thought about before. And I'm sure you're doing this in your talks, is just relating your experience to what that would feel like in their organization. And they're probably thinking of someone who may have worked there before, someone who's working there now, or someone who it's the future of tomorrow. If you're just talking about non-binary folks, more and more young people are identifying, as non-binary, which is awesome, right? But most workplaces aren't ready for that. And you're you're the catalyst, right? So I think that that's really important. And definitely on the piece of equity versus equality, and I think our movement has not really done a good job, is really emphasizing the point of giving people what they need, getting curious, embracing the platinum rule, not the golden rule, which is treating other people in the way in which they want to be treated. And in order to do that, you have to get to know who they are. And it goes back to kind of one of your values in your business, which is building human relationships and just getting curious, right? A piece of mentorship that you were talking about, huge, really huge. There's so much. I mean, so many people who listen to the show. You're running your business. You are at the top of your game. You have so much to give, just giving, reaching out to a young person who is LGBT or from another underrepresented community, and just giving attention and kind of focusing on what you can share, but also what you can learn, right? I mean, these are collaborative mentorship relationships. It goes both directions. And kind of just one other point, just to kind of say, you're on the right path. You're a small business right now. The fact that you're thinking about dynamic hiring, the fact that you're prioritizing that as a value, the fact that when you update your website again, like pronouns is top of mind. These are things that, whoa, like if every business was there just thinking about it, I think workplace culture would be totally, totally different. So again, kudos to what you're doing.
I'm
yes.
glad you approve, Rose.
I do.
I think as someone who thinks about these things all the time, I will always feel like I'm behind, and it will never be comforting to me to know that there are other people further behind, and I'm not just saying that to be super humble about it. It's just something that like knowing that there's more work to be done will always spur me forward. And I hope to spread that message that there is business value to this. It's not just like, I think a lot of people see it as like feelings or like extra work to be done, but it's like, it just unlocks all of this like amazing power and goodwill to be thinking and talking about these things and exposing yourself. And it sounds like for your audience doesn't need to be told this, right? But the more that we can get the word out that there is a business case, the more that we can like share white papers. Not all of us are going to like go for the argument about like social equity or like social justice. In fact, the majority of people aren't amenable to those arguments. So
no.
I just wander around waving like studies by McKinsey and be like, hey.
I mean, at all angles. I mean, if you want to appeal to the intellectual side of folks, and people are just motivated by the bottom line, this is the future. If that's like the only motivator you have, like pure capitalist, it's there. The numbers are there. So, and frankly, that coupled with demographic shifts over the next few decades, this is the future, right? And if we're as entrepreneurs not thinking about this, we can guarantee some of the bigger corporations, as much as marketing dollars go to doing culture work, If the kind of values aren't off the walls and into the halls, as Erica Keswin says, then the relevancy of those organizations, those businesses, good luck. Good luck. So I mean, you're ahead if you're listening to the show and you're thinking about it, and even if you're just taking one step today or this month, it's like climbing a mountain. I mean, you can always look up and say, okay, that summit is so far away. But you can also look back and say, whoa, I'm halfway. Cool. I mean, that's business broadly, right? I mean, we can always set up the goal markers and say, all right, this is where I need to go. And then by the time you get to, I don't know, I'm going to use football, but by the time you get to an end zone, you reestablish what those goal lines are, because everything's always moving. Everything's always changing. So I guess my takeaway here is celebrate your successes, if this is a value of yours to be more inclusive and building an inclusive organization, have patience with yourself too, because it's culture change and that takes time. It definitely takes time. So we have been talking a bunch, and I guess, these two questions often take a little bit longer than what we have time for. So I'm hoping you can give us the abridged version maybe of two things. The first is, can you share with us briefly a time when you were in the workplace where you felt like you couldn't bring your whole self to work? And just kind of let us know what was going on in that situation and how you were able to work around it. And then I'm going to ask you another question that is completely the inverse of that. So this is the challenge, is trying to do this in 3 minutes or less. But if you can quickly share something with us, I think that will definitely give motivation to our audience as we're considering how out we can be in business, and hopefully for folks figuring out you can be out in business and you can work with dream clients. And in fact, people are attracted to working with you when you are comfortable with who you are, right? We want some more courage. So can you let us know a time maybe that pops up for you and what was going on?
That's a really tough question for me to answer, in part because I've been out as queer since I was a teenager, and I've been moving through the world as a gender nonconforming person since that time.
Right.
And so I haven't had a ton of experiences where I've met with resistance in the workplace because of how I look, because I that's sort of an inescapable thing from jump, right? But I will say the following. I came to my father one time after applying for a series of jobs, and I'd gotten really far with the leaders in the industry. I'd gotten really far in the application processes for these really competitive jobs. And I went to my dad and I was like, dude, why am I not getting these jobs? Yeah. And he's an older white guy. He just retired recently. He's been in boardrooms the majority of his adult life. And he looked me straight in the eye and was like, it's because of how you look. They don't want to hire you. They can't put you in front of their clients. Mm. Yeah. And that was so disheartening in some ways. Yeah. But it was also I've never wanted to believe that was the case. And so hearing it from my father, who loves me very much and had refrained from telling me that for the first quarter of a century I was alive, was very hard to hear. Yeah. But it was also extremely freeing because, and again, I had the privilege to make this, pivot. Yeah. I had the privilege to say, okay, you know what? If they don't want me, I don't want them. Yeah. I'm going to go do something else. Yeah. And that is an incredibly privileged position to be in. Mm-hmm. But when I go in and talk with these corporates and people who are in these companies who came and heard my talk, who aren't able to be themselves in the workplace, who have to cover in one or multiple ways, come to me afterwards and they're like, thanks so much for your talk. It was really great to hear you. I'm really at my wit's end here. I don't know what to do. And it's it's a terrible position to be in. But what I keep telling people is that, there's some reasons why we just can't leave jobs because we have to cover, for many of us, we don't have that luxury. But if you're worried that you're not going to be able to find a job elsewhere, and if that's the thing that's keeping you from looking around, in this day and age, companies and industries are changing. And in almost every industry, there are a couple of leading companies that may not have been big fish when you started working, but are starting to be more and more competitive. And a key to their competitive advantage is their inclusive policies.
100%. Yep.
So don't hold yourself back from looking around just because where you are isn't comfortable for you. Go to your competitor. Because I bet you one of your main competitors probably has inclusive hiring practices and would love to have your insider expertise and your experience and your loyalty and hard work, and for you to bring all of yourself to work.
Yes.
So
that's so powerful. Thank you.
I don't know if that was 3 minutes.
No, that was great. That was really great. And usually I like to spend a little more time on this. And so we're going to bring you back on the show anyway. So at some point. So, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really, really helpful. And I hope that for our audience, that gives inspiration around if you are working for someone still. I know the show's geared towards entrepreneurs, and there's folks that are thinking about making that leap, and this might be one of those factors, right? And so I think Kat's story is really, it's honest, it's raw, it's hard to hear, right? It's kind of the reality of some of the more established companies that are out there. And similarly, right, like these new and emerging companies that are growing and becoming the big fish of the future are leading with inclusion, right? And thinking about LGBT folks. So that is the silver lining to probably the hardest question of the interview. On the flip, right, you've got a lot of lived experience. You've been out since you were a teenager, right? Like, what from that lived experience allows you to stand out as a business owner? What is an LGBT superpower that you've gleaned from your life that you leverage in business today?
Well, I think that being marginalized doesn't do anything inherently to make us more sensitive or more talented or more aware of the issues that face our group or other marginalized groups. And I say group with the caveat that like nothing is a monolith, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
But for me, I'm not just cognizant that I'm different. I'm also cognizant that my visible difference is met by other people who find it like problematic or threatening. But I also have like privilege as a white person with a really good education, a family that was well off growing up, and my hyper visible difference. I'm the kind of person, which you can't hear on the interview, who when they walk into a women's bathroom is often met with surprise, if not alarm, by at least one person. So going to the bathroom in public is a very like interesting experience for me.
Yep. Yeah.
But I'm also the kind of person who has enough privilege that I feel like I have a responsibility as someone who's different to show people that difference doesn't have to be threatening or kept silent. And so these like my marginalization and my privilege to come together for me to form something like a spur to speak truth to power, because there are certain rooms that I can get into that other people can't, where I can elucidate certain topics, and to stand up for myself, and when appropriate, big asterisk there, to stand up for others, because I can use my voice at times when others who might look like me may not be safe to do so, or may not feel that they can, or that they'll be heard. That's very important for me. So I feel like my gay superpower is being someone who, I don't know, is just incredibly and ineluctably out, just by the very nature of like the way that the shape that I cut as I move through the world. And I try to turn that into a teachable moment for everybody. And sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes I come out of bathrooms like scream crying at my partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's like learned to understand exactly what that means. So I don't have to say anything at all.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I have the strength and power to do that. And I feel like it's a privilege. It's like the Spider-Man thing. It's like but the opposite. It's like with great responsibility comes great power. And that's power that I try to leverage to help make difference less threatening, or to stand up to bullies. I'll also just say, sort of piggybacking on this other thing, is like my business partner prefers they, them pronouns, identifies as gender nonconforming. And they and I've had serious conversations, actually multiple of them since we started, where they're like, they've expressed hesitance about using their pronouns. I hope they're not going to kill me for saying this on the air, but they've expressed hesitation about using their pronouns with clients. And I said to them point blank, look, if a client doesn't want to work with us because you prefer they, them pronouns, then I don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah. And
again, that's like a luxury in many ways, but I firmly believe that that's the only ethical way for my company to do business as an entrepreneur.
100%. Yeah.
So that's, sort of our gay superpower as a company, is to just be extremely out and ineluctably so. And to say, if you've got a problem with us, then go find someone else to build your stupid website.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that goes back to the authenticity factor where you're standing in your power. It's complicated because there's instances where you don't have privilege and there's instances where you have a ton of it, right? And the fact that you recognize that you have access, there's not a lot to lose by just being 100% who you are, sharing that with other people. You do that all the time when you speak. And that changes the dynamic, right? Because you're coming in confident and you're able to say no, when you're talking about clients, if they're not the right fit. And I know that for a lot of folks, when you're starting your business, it's hard to kind of turn, if you're thinking about cash flow, if you're thinking about all of those things, of keeping the doors open, it could be scary to say no if a client isn't necessarily the right fit. Though when you do find your no, you get a lot closer to working with those dream clients, right? And you're able to attract them. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, Kat. And so I really thank you for sharing that and reflecting on kind of some of the rainbow superpowers that we do bring. We are at the end of our conversation. So I was hoping that you could share with our audience the single best place to find out more about Diver Collective and to learn more about you and your co-founder as well.
Oh, yeah. So you can find us pretty easily at www.divercollective.com or on LinkedIn through Rhodes. But our website's a pretty good and reliable place to find us.
Very cool. And we will include that along with some other really helpful information in our show notes. So be sure to go over to outentrepreneur.com. If you don't want to type all of that out, you can text OUTBOSS, all one word, to 444-999, and we will hook you up with those show notes and connect you with the show and all of the exciting things that we're up to this year and going into 2020. So, Kat, thank you again for being on the show. And for Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Kat. So if you haven't done so yet, consider subscribing to the podcast, leave a rating and review wherever you consume podcasts, and be sure to share the show with a friend or a loved one if it can help. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.